So at this point in time, I would like to invite Susan up to the stage. She's worked with hundreds of companies and thousands of executives to help them create their business plans and execute them in the most collaborative and effective ways. So I introduce to you Susan, and I thank her for coming, and please enjoy and learn how to work smarter, not harder.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's exciting to be here, not just because you have such a great purpose, and you do. And I love children. I've been on the board of directors for Lad Lake, which is Youth at Risk. So I've supported children my whole life as well as, and also have been a mother of two. But what's also exciting about speaking here today is to be at a worldwide conference and having the ability to just walk across the street to be here because my office is 2 blocks away. And that's unusual because being an author, I normally have to travel afar to talk to people. So I would say I'm probably the closest one here today, right? Did anybody have it closer? Except if you're on the 13th floor, right? Right. Right, exactly. But today's talk is based on my book that will be coming out late spring, as she said, called Ego at Work. Align to your purpose and change your mindset so that you can have more passion, power, and peace at work and at home. And who doesn't want that, right? Because oftentimes we get with an organization that we love the purpose. And I'm sure that's why all of you work where you work, right? Is you love the purpose. But then something happens that changes our mindset. And all of a sudden we forget about that connection to the purpose. And we get into the work. And we get into these dynamics that steal that passion and steal that power and steal that peace as we go home. I often get a call from people, and I do 90% of my work really is business to business. I do public speaking, but 90% is a consultant. And usually the call sounds something like this: can you come fix my people? And I'll never forget when I got the first phone call like that. It was 25 years ago, and this person was foreign, and he said it with a foreign accent. Can you come fix my people? And I said to him, well, let me ask you a question. If you were one of the people that needed the fixing, how would you feel about that? And he laughed a little bit, and it was silent for a little bit on the other side of the line. And he was taken back, and he said to me, well, I'll change a little bit, but they're the ones that have to do most of the changing. And how often do we have that mindset? That it's really them that have the problem. And when we look outside of ourselves as the problem, it's very difficult to fix it. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at our mindset as being the greatest asset that we have, and realizing that every relationship that we have is really a relationship with ourselves. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let me tell you a little bit of a story. And this actually just happened last week. My 2 adult daughters, who are 33 and 27, both live out of state. One lives in LA, and the other in Nashville, Tennessee. The one that's 33 already has a baby, which makes me a nana. And she's 2 years old, and we had a great weekend because my youngest one is getting married. She's getting married at the end of the month, and she'll finally be off the payroll. Now, don't get me wrong, I love children, but I'm a little excited about that too. And we had a bachelorette party for her, and that got all done. And then on Sunday, it was a beautiful day, and I live on Pewaukee Lake, and I have a little beach on the lake, and I thought, what a great day to spend outside. And my little granddaughter, Ava, could actually play in Nana's sandbox. I've got this great little beach, and it has rocks around it. It's like a little sandbox. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if the boy next door could come over and play with her, bring some of his toys, and they could have a good time. So sure enough, we're out there not very long, about 10 minutes, and the little boy next door, who's about 4 years old, grabs his trucks, and he comes on over, and they're playing great in the sandbox together. And I'm feeling kind of proud. I'm thinking, look at how nice she's playing. She must be watching those webinars with my daughter on how to play nice in the sandbox. Look at how she's sharing those toys and creating and innovating with him. And then all of a sudden, within a minute or two, I heard the 2 favorite words that 2-year-olds have that come out of their mouth. And what are they? Mine. No and mine. And she grabs his truck. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, isn't that interesting? That's often what I see in the workplace. No, we've tried that before. That's not going to work. No, that's too difficult. That's not going to work. Or mine. I want to talk about mine, my idea. What about my idea? And if somebody doesn't like our idea, we oftentimes want to take our toys and get out of the sandbox, right? Or kick the sand in somebody's face. And I thought to myself, isn't that interesting how this innate experience is within us at a young age? You know, children are egocentric, right? It's all about them. What's in it for me, make me feel important. That's really the two signs they wear. And that's very normal for little children. Well, it just happens to be pretty normal for big children too, right? I often say we're just little children and big bodies. So when I go into the workplace, what I'm really doing is teaching people to work with their limited resources without having a limited mindset, and to be able to collaborate and innovate with one another and not think about what's in it for me or make me feel important. Take the I out, because as we all know, there's no I in teamwork, right? And align to the purpose and ask the questions that are going to help us bring inspiration to us so that we really don't have to work by perspiration. We get that aha moment, that heightened awareness where we know exactly what we have to do so that 20% of what we do is hitting the nail on the head and is creating 80% impact. The old 80-20 rule in business. And as we listened to our speakers this morning, I couldn't have agreed more. It's not how much you spend on whether it's payroll or marketing or resources. What really matters most is the ROI. Do you know what ROI stands for? Return on investment. And as I go into companies and I teach people how to work together, to be more collaborative, to be more innovative, and to align with the purpose, and figure out what are those initiatives that are going to give us that kind of impact, that pie chart does expand, like Dan said. You see maybe a little bit more expense in the business, but what you see is this huge return on investment. And what's required? A shift in mindset. The ability to not make it about you, to not get offended, to not be fear-based. Now that might be a big phrase, right? Fear-based? You think, well, what do you mean I'm not fear-based? Of course I'm not fear-based. What I'm talking about is this attachment that we have to something that's really common that Maslow has talked about, which is our attachment to safety, security, love, and belonging. So how does that apply in your job at work? Well, you know, some of us think that, oh, if I have conflict with somebody I work with, it's not going to be a safe relationship in the future, you know. They're going to, talk to the hand, sort of diss me. I'm not going to be part of the team. I'm not going to belong. You know, and these are my friends too, right? You know, look around. I mean, you're all so social. I'm sure you've built relationships with one another. And then pretty soon the relationship becomes more important and keeping that intact than the purpose. So we don't want to ruffle those feathers either, do we? Safety, security, love, we get that at work, and belonging. So we suddenly shift our focus off of the purpose onto this attachment, this need, and we're no longer able to be open-minded, collaborative, and innovative. Our conversations change. We start to have meetings that instead of having them be innovative and us challenging one another on our best practices, what are we doing instead? Updates, right? Just little updates going around the room. Did you get that done? Oh, yeah, well, I got part of this done, but then this came up and that came up. And, okay, well, I'm not going to say anything about that because I don't want to ruffle that feather. Okay, well, next meeting. And then pretty soon we don't want to have any meetings with those kinds of meetings, right? Because how useful and efficient are they? So then we stop communicating altogether. And everybody's really busy, right? Everybody's really busy, but are we being efficient? Are we really practicing that 80-20 rule? So that's what we're going to be talking about in our short time today, is really aligning with that purpose and changing that mindset and learning to have a different relationship with self so that we're not operating from those attachments, and therefore we can have a different relationship with each other. So in order to change our mindset, I brought my construction hat. You knew that cartoon was me, right? I paid the cartoonist a little extra. I said, do me a favor and accentuate the good ones, the good points, and de-accentuate the other ones. So he did for an extra $50, bless his heart. Anyway, so I'm putting on my tool belt and my construction hat because we are going to reconstruct your mindset. And the way we're going to do that is through some of my tools here. I brought my flashlight. Hopefully the battery's working. You know, I don't use this very often. But we're going to take a look at some of the dynamics. We're going to measure it up a little bit, figure out what's going on. We might have to hammer a few things out. Well, this one I might have to keep here, and I think we're going to have to do a little tweaking on a couple of things too, just to make sure that our mindset is exactly where it needs to be. Now, you all look like you're a great group of people, so I don't think we're going to have to do a lot of reconstruction. Right? I mean, I know you're only relating just a little bit to what I'm saying. Well, except for the person next to you. I know you think they're relating a lot, right? So we're just going to go through this a little bit and talk about, again, this love that we have for the purpose. Now, everybody raise your hand. I mean, I know this is a consensus, but how many of you love the purpose of the organization? You're here because you love children. Okay, fantastic. But then what happens, and I want you to be really honest, is we cannot create out of lack. We can only create out of love. Now, everybody close your eyes so I'm the only one that can see this. Now, close your eyes and raise your hand and tell me, how many of you have believed this thought in the last 30 days, that there has not been either enough resources, there's not been enough money, there's not been enough support? If any of these sound familiar, start raising your hand. The person you're working with isn't doing enough. Okay, so everybody had their hand raised, right? So we start to have this mindset that says there's not enough. I love this purpose, but there's not enough, which creates this mindset of lack, of deprivation thinking, and limited thinking. Now I'm going to tell you a story because you'll relate to this. This was a nonprofit. I was working with the Library Association, and we were doing strategic planning. Nonprofit, right? And we were talking about what were some of the needs they had under the goal of customer service. And they were talking about how they just didn't have the latest technology. And if only they had these instant scanners at the front desk, people wouldn't have to wait in line during the busy time. Because there were certain busy times after school and weekends and so on and so forth. Well, I was starting to hear some grumbling in the audience. And some of the people were saying, well, that's a great idea, but we'll never get the money for that. Do you know how much that costs? And it was this big number. I can't remember what it was, but it was a big number. And I said, whoa, time out. Let's not think about what we can't do. Let's think about what we need, and then let's figure out how we're going to get it. So is this something that would really make a difference? So we looked at the difference if they had a scanner versus if they hired more people, and what made better sense, and the scanner technology made better sense. I said, now let's focus on how might we get that, and just open up our mind to the possibility. And it really took a little digging to get them to open up their mind. Well, they did. Well, by the time we met next, which was a couple weeks later, one of the people came back and said, you'll never believe this. I was actually helping in line because we were so busy. And a woman came up. She was way in the back. By the time she got to the front, I said, I'm so very sorry that you had to wait. We're really hoping that we can get a scanner someday and make this process a lot faster, but we don't have the funds right now. She said, it just came out of my mouth. And the woman said, really? She goes, yeah, that would, that's what we're really hoping for, but thank you for waiting. She goes, well, actually, I just inherited some money and I've been praying about how might I donate it? She goes, I love to read. I love books. She goes, you just gave me a purpose. And the woman donated the money. Now, how did that happen? How did that happen? Because you opened up your mind. Instead of focusing on what you don't have and what can't happen, which is lack, right? We begin to focus on what we know will serve the purpose and the kids, right? And then we open up our mind to the question of how might we? You're going to hear me say this a couple times in my talk, because that phrase, how might we, is very powerful. Now, because this woman had opened up her mind and she shared, look what came to her. Could that possibly happen with you in your organization? Exactly, right? But how often are we so sure it's not possible? Now let's take a look at some of the common mindsets that are with nonprofits, but I got to be honest with you, I almost didn't want to write that up there because, as I said, I'm a business consultant and I go into, some nonprofits. And I go into profit companies. And the truth of the matter is, honestly, they are not different. The mindset is the mindset is the mindset. In fact, I'm going to share this with you, and you won't know what church it is, so I'm not divulging any kind of secret here, but I'll never forget several years ago when a church, you'd think that would have a different mindset, right? A church hired me to come in and work with their leadership church, and this was one of these big mega churches. And they had about 15 people on the leadership team. And they wanted to go through a build-out where they were going to, need to raise money. And there was a lot of negativity and a lot of, belief about lack. And there was a lot of problems on the leadership team, so they had me come in. And I'm telling you, honestly, had I been blindfolded and I didn't know who I was doing the consulting with, I would have thought it was a regular business. It's honestly the same, whether it's profit or nonprofit, that we tend to have these concepts of lack. Let me ask you this question. How many times do you say to somebody, how are you? And what do they answer? Either fine or okay, or I'm so busy. How often do you hear that? Oh, I'm so busy. I'm tired, right? Oh, fine. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm so busy. I'm tired. Okay? But even if it's fine or okay, you get this sense in the tone, right? That people have a lot going on. And as a result, we have this mindset that says, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. And again, this isn't just nonprofit who often believe they're the ones with the lack of resources because like what Dan said, we can't, invest in our business. Well, guess what? The economy, that did that to profit businesses too. They were lean-sized. People were doing at least 1.5 jobs. And so they got attached to this thinking of, I don't have enough time. I'm so busy picking low fruit, just getting my job done, that I don't have any time to think of anything strategically, creatively, innovatively, to work towards the goals. And again, don't raise your hand, but how many times have you thought that? Don't have enough time to do all the things I'd want to do. And we're going to challenge that. We're going to challenge that yet today. And then this awareness thing. Well, if only we had a bigger marketing budget, if only we had more awareness, then we could do what we wanted to do, but we don't have that, so we can't. So we can't do that. Or how about this one? It goes back to the money, right? Well, if we had the awareness and I had the time, I could actually go out there and fundraise and we'd have the money. So these things are all connected, right? It's pretty futile, right? What are we going to do about this? And then now, because as a result of all that, we don't have the resources. And then like Dan said, oh my gosh, if we do have the money and we invested in the resources, well, we don't want to be under the scope. So then we have a negative mindset about that. See how these things just kind of easily creep in? So seductively. Or how about the engagement? Okay, well, one thing we do have is volunteers. We have a board. We have these great people, but are people really engaged? How can I possibly engage people if I'm not paying them? They're volunteers. I can't push them too hard. So I'm stuck there too. And you might not be quite this consciously saying this to yourself, But it's back here. It's back here saying, we don't have enough. And, we're working so hard just to make it happen because we don't have those things that we don't have enough fun either. Except I heard you a lot of fun last night with your little pajama party. I normally don't bring this garb, but when I heard you had your red PJs on, I thought I fit right in with this. Because we can be so busy working, right, that we forget how to whistle while we work. We forget to open up our hearts and remember, why did we join this organization? Because there was something that got us excited and that we were passionate about, this purpose. But we just think, okay, now I got to put my nose to the grindstone and just work. Well, my question is, are you tired of that? Would you like to change your mindset? Well, let's do that then. Okay, let's take a look at what makes you want to fret instead of foster. And it is this thing called ego. She was talking about my book title, EGO, ego. The reason she emphasized EGO is I really think it is an acronym. I think it's an acronym for two things. Our ego edges the group out, right? Because we're more I-focused, me-focused, what's in it for me, make me feel important. So how in the world are you going to collaborate together as a group and innovate if you have an ego mindset, right? But ego, I believe, also edges God out. And I know when I say that in my talk, that might not be politically correct, but let me define to you what I mean when I say that. When I mean it edges God out, I mean our God-like self out, this ability that we have to connect to this inner knowing. Call it an intuitive voice, call it a higher power, call it whatever semantic you need to call it to make it right for you, but it's something that comes to us as inspiration versus us trying to figure out in the left part of our brain through logic or reason. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with logic or reason. But brain researchers have proven, and this is a scientific fact, they have proven that there is a left hemisphere of your brain and there is a right hemisphere of your brain. And they've proven that there's this little bridge called a corpus callosum in your brain that connects the left hemisphere and it connects the right hemisphere. And when you're fretting and you're running around trying to make it happen like a little busy bee, you are operating in what they call the beta brainwave. Busy beta. And when you're in busy beta, that little corpus callosum, that little bridge, goes from a 4-lane highway to a dirt road. And what does that mean? That means that you are not able to access higher brain thinking. So if you're not accessing higher brain thinking, what are you accessing? Well, you're accessing lower brain thinking, or what they call the lizard brain. Now, in the lizard brain, we have these automatic impulses called fight-flight. Fight-flight. It's yes or no. It's very black and white, either or. We're going to do it, we're not going to do it. Very impulsive kind of thinking and behavior. When we slow down and we breathe more deeply and we breathe into our belly, we actually enter what they call the alpha brainwave. And when we do that, that corpus callosum opens up and it becomes that 4-lane highway again. And that allows us to go into higher brain thinking. And in the top of our brain, which is more difficult to access, lies, guess what? Creativity, problem solving, and intuition. That's where those aha moments come from. Now let me ask you, how many of you have had an aha moment? Before you raise your hand, I mean anything that gives you that chill in your body where you knew something happened and it was something you were wondering about. Oftentimes this will happen when you slow down. Maybe you're driving in your car, maybe you're taking a shower, maybe you're cutting the lawn, maybe you're doing yoga, maybe you're golfing, unless you golf like me, and then I'm really in beta because I'm thinking too hard. And I want you to think, raise your hand. Have you had that aha? So you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And it's just this heightened awareness that you know that answer is exactly for you. Now, that happened to me so many years ago, and this was the catalyst for my career. It was 20 years ago. My youngest daughter was 7, and I was going through a divorce. And I was working part-time doing the business that I'm doing now. I hadn't written any books yet, but I was doing coaching and consulting. And I didn't want to have to travel when my kids were younger as a public speaker, because I wanted to be able to be home with them. If I was going to be divorced, I didn't want to be an absent mom. So I asked the question, how might I double my income so I can live the lifestyle I have right now, but not double my time? In other words, still work part-time. So it was a question. It was an and question. How might I double my income and still work part-time? Now, most people, when I told them I was focused on that question, they're looking at me like, seriously? That's a big Christmas list, girl. You know, you're going to have to travel, and you're just going to have to understand that's the way it's going to have to be. I said, no, I'm not closing my mind to this. So I got real quiet. I slowed down. I went to visit my mom in Florida, laid on the beach. That's a great place to get that aha moment. I'm laying on the beach, and all of a sudden it came to me. Contact the local radio stations and tell them you'll barter. Tell them that you'll train and coach their salespeople and their staff if they barter time for you locally. And I came up with this thing called Performance Solutions. I'll do these 60-second vignettes, and I'll give people tips on how to have a better mindset. We'll call it Susan K. Wehrley's Performance Solutions, and here's your 60-second mindset reset. So I contacted the smooth jazz station in town. They said, great idea. And we actually happened to need a trainer. I got on the air, 6 months, boom. My business started booming. I doubled my rates. I'm working part-time. It's happening. Well, then the other radio station, the news station in town, the #1 WISN, news station, heard my commercials. They called me up. They said, hey, we want to talk to you. We love your little vignettes. We want to give you a 1-hour radio show every week. I said, perfect. So I did. So I'm on the air, and I'm getting calls, and all my business is within a 2-hour radius. And guess what happened? I tripled my business, tripled my rates, worked part-time, and didn't have to travel. Now, how did that happen? Because I formulated a question. I wasn't focusing on what I didn't want and fretting over it. I was fostering what I did want by focusing on how might I have this and that. How might I have this and that? But see, our big ego is so busy fretting with this little voice inside that's, oh, they're not enough. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. I've got to make it happen. I can't count on them. And we have such a limited mindset thinking it's all on our shoulders, and that's the only way we know how to do it. Or the little ego senses that intensity, and they believe, well, they're not going to listen to me anyway. My opinion doesn't count, so you know what? I can't seem to do it right. Fine. Let them do it. And what do we have in the workplace, whether it's nonprofit or profit, is we have these kind of two personalities, these two egos that show up. One that's kind of trying to be the hero to do everything and put the weight on their shoulders, and the other one's like, okay, fine, I'll get out of your way. So what don't we have? What we don't have are people working together in this synergistic way with an open mindset, posing a question that begins with how might we, and solving the problem through collaboration and innovation. And it might not be either them or you. It might be something completely different, like the solution I just mentioned, right? I was just doing a coaching session last week, and I just love when I work with executives and they have this paradigm shift. And it was through a national organization that's a credit union. And the executive was the person who's in charge of creating the business loans and the mortgage loans. And he's really good at what he does. He's super creative. Wow, he just seems to know what the market needs, and he knows how to come up with those solutions. But the reason they hired me to work with him is he tended towards this big ego. Now, you might know somebody like this, or maybe this is you. And what he tended to do is he tended to like to be the guy who had all the right answers. So if somebody would start to say an idea, he'd go, you know what? I don't think that's going to work. This is what I think we should do. And people were getting put off about that because they would go into their little ego. Do you see that at your tent at all? In your workplace? So that got up to the CEO, and the CEO called me and said, I want you to work with him. So I'd been working with him for a couple of months, teaching him the skills and how to be more open-minded and more collaborative by focusing on what problem are we solving and forming that question and getting people's input and then figuring out what's the best solution and who's going to do what by when. Well, suddenly his organization, his department, was becoming this smooth machine. And guess what? He was exceeding all his goals. So our very last session, he said to me, Susan, I got to be really honest with you. He goes, you know, we're exceeding our goals. There's hardly any turnover. Everybody's really happy. He goes, but I'm feeling a little lost. I go, that's fantastic. He goes, really? Why? I go, you just are having an identity crisis. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, you are no longer attached to your big ego anymore. And now that you're not operating out of that, you don't know who you are. Congratulations. And he goes, oh my gosh, I think you're right. He goes, honestly, I don't know how to focus. I don't know what to do. I go, well, let's explore that. And so I used my how might we question. I said, how might you spend your time to reach the goals in even a more expansive way if you're not rescuing people? How might you use your time? He goes, well, you know, that's a really good question. He goes, you know, I really have always wanted to visit the branches. I've really always wanted to do more research here. I've really always wanted to document my best practices and write them down and give them to people and do more coaching and training. And all of a sudden, as he was thinking of more and more ideas, he was getting excited. I'm like, are you writing this down? I go, now, I want you to line those ideas up with the goals and present that to the CEO. He goes, that's a good idea. And I said, and I got another thing I'd like you to do. I'd like you to meet with your VPs and ask them what ideas they may have for you and what you could do with your time right now. And you know what he did? Whoa, I don't know if I'm ready for that one. I said, why is that? He goes, you know, there's something about ignorance is bliss. And I go, well, tell me more about that. He goes, well, opening myself up and asking, you know, the other VPs and how I could improve in my department makes me feel a little exposed. I said, well, you don't think they're thinking it? You don't think they're noticing? Now you're just opening up the lines of communication. And what would happen if you opened up the lines of communication? How much more could you grow and could your organization grow? But that's our ego, right? Our ego wants to edge the group out and be blissfully ignorant to what other people think because there's something inside of us that gets this feeling, and we don't like feeling that feeling. Do you know what that feeling is, that vulnerable feeling? It's like offended if anybody would have any sort of critique for what we're doing. So if we're going to be madly and wildly successful, what is one of the things we have to work on? Remember what I said? Every relationship is a relationship with self. So if you want to be wildly successful, you've got to get out of your own way. You got to get out of your own way and stop fretting and just work on fostering and aligning with the purpose and asking, how might I succeed? Now, let's talk about just a couple dynamics that happen at work. I think it's really important for you to be able to identify these dynamics and have a mindset mantra on how to respond to them, and also to be able to see it in yourself. And that's that when our ego is at work, we often see two dynamics happen. One is called the blame-shame game, and the other one is called the power and control struggle. You already know what I'm talking about, don't you? And we see this in families too, by the way. So everything I'm sharing with you today, I see some, would you talk to my spouse? These are really what I would call life skills. And even though it's ego at work everywhere, right? So the blame shame game is when we're not hitting our goal or when we're not getting it done in the time frame we expected. Our mindset wants to automatically go to this question: who's at fault? Who's at fault? Now, I'll tell you a story about that. I was coaching somebody else who was a VP of an organization that was an IT organization. She said to me, Susan, I got to be honest with you. She goes, we are way behind in creating the IT that we need to for our organization. She goes, and my mind is going there big time. She goes, to the point where fear is getting in so much, I'm starting to think somebody's sabotaging us. That's if it's not God in the universe, it's somebody within our organization or somebody's coming outside the organization getting in our firewall somehow. She goes, I can't believe how much I'm thinking about having to point my finger out here. She goes, it got to the point that when I was going to work in the morning, I actually was one of those people with road rage. I said, oh, it was, somebody cut you off. I suppose you got a little angry. How? She goes, no, let's be really clear. I was cutting everybody else off. And I was getting angry. They weren't moving over fast enough. That's how bad it got. And so we laughed. And we said, how normal is that? Now, you might not like that answer. But here's what I tell you. I tell you that the more you become aware of your ego, the more you're in control of it, and the less it's in control of you. So I want you all to stick out your hand right now and go like this and say, hello, ego. Hello, ego. Because your ego is always right there, ready to get activated, just like this, okay? And the more you're able to acknowledge it when it's just a thought in your mind, it won't turn into a behavior. Because thoughts create feelings, create behavior, create results. So if you can catch it at that thought process, and you can catch yourself in the blame game wanting to be in fear, and wanting might seem like an odd word, but there's something about when we're in fear, we get to absolve ourselves from responsibility of solving the problem. We get a benefit from that. And we want to be in fear, and we want to find something outside of ourselves to blame. That's not enough. They're not enough. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough time. And then we don't have to take responsibility. Right? So say hello to your ego, notice your thought, and change your mindset. And change it to a problem-solving question of, okay, it is what it is. It is what it is. Now the question becomes, how might we? Let's work the problem, folks. What movie is that from? Failure's not an option. Let's work the problem, folks. That was Apollo 13 for those of you who saw it. Remember what happened? Remember what happened in the movie? Yeah. At first, when he was explained to him, we're not going to make it to the moon. We have to come back to the earth. Remember he drew that on the board? We've got to come back to the earth. How are we going to do that? And they had limited resources, right? And what did everybody start to do? Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. Oh, I can't guarantee this, I can't guarantee that. And they went into that negative mindset, that fearful mindset. Nobody wanted to take responsibility. And what did he say? The guy in the white vest, what was his name? Well, you know who I'm talking about, right? He said, don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can do. Work the problem, folks. So notice when you're in the blame-shame game, or notice when somebody else is in the blame-shame game, and say, let's not focus on what we can't do. Let's focus on what we can do. Let's create a problem-solving statement, and let's solve the problem, folks. How much time would that be saving you at work? And fretting in your mind. All right, now we also have the power and control struggle, and that's a little bit different. That's more about importance. That's more about make me feel important. Whose idea is going to get met? Whose needs are going to get met? How is this going to affect me? Instead of how is this going to affect the organization? What's best for the good of the all? So when you start to hear people talking about, oh, this is how it's going to affect me, or this is what I think, and it's a lot of me and I, we just need to shift it. And we need to shift the conversation by saying, let's talk about what's for the best, for the good of the all. Let's line up with the purpose. What's our purpose again? Let's line up with the goals, and let's find that 80-20 solution that's going to make us hit the target. 20% investment with 80% impact. That's what we're looking for. And then it doesn't matter whose idea it is, right? Keep innovating and brainstorming till you get to the one that gets you there. And oftentimes it isn't one person's idea. It's a combination of many, many ideas. So, how do we change our lack mindset? Well, we use this one phrase, and it might sound so simple, but how might I? Or how might we solve X? How might I reach the purpose? How might I reach the goals? What obstacle came in your way? How might I solve that? And what I want you to do right now is all think about something that's been an obstacle in you reaching your goals. What has that been? And just write down that question right now. What we're going to be doing in the breakout session is we're going to actually be focusing on the power of that statement by looking at those negative mindsets that were there earlier. You know, the one about lack of time, lack of resources. Remember those, that list? And we're going to turn them into phrases that we can actually problem solve. And we're going to break up into little groups, whichever one you identify with the most. So instead of saying we have a lack of time, what if we said, how might we have meetings, effective meetings, to further us towards the goals? So by the time we're done with that meeting, we know exactly what's the initiative and who's doing what by when. Wouldn't that make you more time efficient? So a meeting that you brainstormed on an obstacle, and then you actually came up with a solution or a project or an initiative, and everybody left the meeting on who was doing what by when. How often do we walk out of the meeting and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing? Okay, so we're going to talk about that in the breakout. How might we be consistent in our branding? So it's not necessarily about doing more marketing or spending more money, but having the impact of a message that is understood. And there's many ways of getting that out there. With social media nowadays, right? That doesn't cost a lot of money, but we have to figure out that exact branding to have the impact. How might we raise money? Kind of like that example I gave you with the library, right? How might we get out of our own box thinking of getting that one big donor? How might we tell our story to more people like she did at the library with that person who was standing in line? How might we find more funding, more income? How might we invest back in the business in a way that will create an ROI? So that we can feel good about that, so that we know ultimately it is going to the kids. How might we engage employees, volunteers, board members, so that they feel passionate about the goals? I was recently working for a nonprofit. Didn't have a problem with getting volunteers. They had lots of volunteers. And if I told you the name of the nonprofit, very well known. But they had a problem keeping regular engagement. So we posed this question, and we set up in 30 minutes. That's all it took us, because we did this effective meeting template. In 30 minutes, we figured out a way how to keep people engaged so they knew exactly how they were adding value to the purpose. And now it's amazing what's happening. Maybe that's one of the questions that you're interested in. How might we create growth through succession planning with our board, employees, and volunteers? Because people really want to know how they contribute. Do you know that the McKinsey study and the Gallup poll research said the number one thing that motivates people is understanding on how they contribute? Go figure. More than money. They want to know how their effort ties directly to the contribution of the organization. So what if you had a plan that correlated their input, their contribution to the growth, and you praise them for that. That would keep them engaged, right? And it would keep the growth happening. And then what about this last one? What about if we did have a plan to whistle while we work, that we had a plan to have fun, and we had a way that we could actually benchmark when we had these milestones of progress, and we could actually find a way to celebrate? Wouldn't that be nice? That's a big part of goal achievement. Do you know that? They say one of the biggest things that you have to do is count those milestones and find a way to celebrate instead of just waiting until it's all done. Now, like I said, in our breakout, we're going to work on these things. We're going to actually break you out into groups and work on how might we collaborate on these ideas and how might we create a plan and communicate in a way that's transparent so other people know what the left and the right hand are doing. And how am I going to do that? Well, actually, it was about 4 years ago. And I was meeting with a board member for one of the nonprofits that I was on the board with, and his name was George Dalton. And George Dalton was the founder and CEO of Fiserv. Did you ever notice on the bottom of your online banking the word Fiserv, F-I-S-E-R-V, Fiserv? You can go home tonight and look at it. He was the founder and the CEO of that company, which, by the way, just happens to be based in Brookfield here in the Milwaukee area. So I was on the board with him, and we were having lunch together, and one day he said to me, "So tell me a little bit about what you do, Susan Wehrley." And he was curious, I think mostly because that happened to be the year that my youngest daughter had just made Miss Wisconsin. And he said, I want to know a little bit about this Miss Wisconsin's mom. That became my nickname for a while. So I said, well, what do you want to know, George? He goes, well, tell me what you do when you go into companies. And I said, well, I basically align people to the purpose and the goals, and I teach them this mindset of learning how to create problem-solving questions. How might we? And getting very collaborative and innovative with one another so that they are creating and communicating and cooperating and concentrating on what's going to have the biggest impact. He goes, well, that's fabulous. You must feel really great about that. I said, I really do. And they bring these skills home, and I feel great when they come home and they tell me they actually have better relationships at home, too, as a result of these skills. And he asked me a powerful question. And he said to me, if you could change or innovate one thing in your business, what would that be? So he turned the tables. He did a Susan K on me. And I said, actually, George, what I would do is I would create a digital dashboard that when these people came out of these meetings and they had all these brilliant ideas and they figured out what that initiative was going to be, that there would be this digital dashboard that they could post it on. And they could put on this digital dashboard who was going to do what by when. And this would be kind of like a hub or an intranet site that people could log on to, and people could see the progress of these initiatives and therefore stay connected to it. I said, because right now companies hire me, and I do strategic planning, and the plan kind of goes in the drawer. You know, maybe once a quarter the president or the CEO goes up there and kind of reminds people where they're at, you know, with the goal. But in the meantime, people aren't thinking about it so much. And I said, I can kind of see on this digital dashboard some kind of wall where people could brag about their progress. So there would be this kind of constant connection and celebration. And he said to me, well, do it. I said, are you kidding me, George? IT? And here I am in this limited mindset, right? I'm the one who teaches this open-mindedness, and my mind just went shut way down. I go, George, IT and me, doesn't work. He said, think about how might I, played a Susan K on me, think about how might I create a digital dashboard that could help, because it sounds to me that you're telling me this would really help companies be more efficient and more connected and be able to collaborate better and play nice in the sandbox. I said, I know, it would. He goes, think about that question, we'll have lunch in 2 weeks. So I did. And all of a sudden, just like that guy I was coaching, all these ideas came flooding out. And I created this business plan. And I presented it to him. And we happened to do it at the airport because he had his office at the airport. And it was a winter day. He gave me the code to get into the airport, which he wasn't supposed to do. He had a hangar. a double hanger. So I put the coat in, I'm going in. I can hardly see where I'm going because it was a really, really bad snowstorm. Found the office, got there. He looked at my business plan. He said, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. He said, I want to be the chairman of your board and an investor. I said, are you kidding? That's not the right thing you're supposed to say, is it? I said, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So I got in my car, and by that time the blizzard had really come, and I could not find the road back. All of a sudden I saw this little area that looked like it was real clear, and I thought, well, that must be the way back. Well, I got on it, and pretty soon I found out I was not on a road. Guess what I was on? I thought, oh no, and I looked around, thank goodness no plane was coming. Got off, found my way back. 3 days later, on my front door, ding dong, was the police. Do you know that it's a federal offense to... Ma'am, were you at the airport this last weekend? I thought they meant Mitchell Field. I said, no, I didn't go anywhere because, I travel a lot. I thought he was talking about that. He goes, do you drive a white BMW? I'm like, yeah, I do. Well, were you at the Waukesha? Yeah, I was there. Well, ma'am, you were on the runway. It's a federal offense. We have to ask you questions. I go, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Anyway, long story short, it was fine. But I got so excited. And that's what happens, right? I mean, think about that story for a moment. My mind shut down, and he was the one encouraging me to open it up. And now, several years later, we have that digital dashboard. And we're in companies, and they're putting their projects and their innovative, creative ideas on there, and they're seeing the progress of these projects. And people are on there posting like you do on Facebook, their projects and what they're doing and tooting their horn, and people are saying, yeah, keep it up, that's great. And they're sharing best practices. And now suddenly people are aligned to the purpose, feeling more passion, more power, because they're realizing it's not their circumstances that are keeping them from reaching their goals, it was their mindset. And more peace because they're no longer fretting, they're actually flourishing. So, what questions do you have? What we're going to be doing in the breakout session is I'm going to give you a little peek of that dashboard and how it works. We're going to break out, like I said, with those 7 questions. And you're going to get a chance to brainstorm. And I am going to show you how you're going to be amazed. And I guarantee you this, how in 20 minutes you are going to be able to solve a problem that your group is going to be assigned to that you've been fretting over for months and maybe years. Because when you have this technique and how to do it, and you are so focused and aligned in this problem-solving question, you'll see the ideas flow. And then if you look at your sheets, you'll see I'm going to give you this written template that is actually on our digital dashboard, that if you do our digital dashboard, you can actually load in the digital dashboard. And that's finally deciding what is that solution you came up with and who's going to do what by when. And this digital dashboard sends you email reminders. It's like having a technology secretary. It's fantastic. You said you were going to get this done by then, and you get flagged if it doesn't. It's wonderful. So that's what we're going to be working on, is figuring out what you need to do to go to that next level. So, what does it take to succeed? Does it take more resources? Does it take more time? Does it take more money? Or does it take a greater alignment to your purpose, an ability to reconstruct your mindset and look at the possibilities instead of what you can't do? Thank you very much for having me here today. God bless you.